I am Yamato Cannon, and this is Muffin, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
TSM went back to Worlds after 2 years of failed qualifications, and they didn't just qualify, they went there as the reigning LCS champions. It's obviously this year, it's based on who wins Summer as to who the number one seed is, so they were a Pool 1 team. So you might now be guessing why the title of the video is the way it is, because that means they were a joint first place seed in this tournament based on the Riot format. And so that meant that because they're going to get put as a seed 1 in a group, and you can get those second and third Korean and Chinese teams, they were going to have to get lucky or they would never be in anything approaching an easy group. Now, listen, I'll be fair at the beginning. They didn't get the easiest group. Like, Pool 3, they had the best Pool 3 team. I mean, actually, because of that whole weird thing where Vietnam couldn't play, so it was Gen.G, easily the strongest Pool 3 team for me. They also got, if I have to be honest, the best Pool 4 team, arguably, on paper. Like, I know Team Liquid ended up looking decent by the end, but yeah, LGD, if you watch them in LPL, especially in like the regional, yeah, they looked legit actually. They looked like a team that was like, you don't want to play them compared to some of the others that are available there. With that said though, let's not get crazy. They didn't get the hardest group. I mean, in Pool 2, that's actually the best that was available is who they got. They got Fnatic, who, listen, were actually very flawed in the summer split, even looked vulnerable in that final against G2. I mean, it's not like they were monsters except when they got to the quarterfinals here. Consider that instead you could have had Xinged Gaming, a favourite for the tournament, Suning, who we didn't know now, but turned out to be, who knows, maybe they're going to win Worlds. DRX, listen, I know everyone thought they're shit because they lost to Damwon. That's just, Damwon is their kryptonite. Like, that team could have done a lot more at this tournament. They're the team where I wish there was a lower bracket for them and Xinged. I think both had chances to go much further. So, in a world where you could have had those teams, you know, getting Fnatic's not bad actually. It gives you a chance. Otherwise, it'd be game over if what you drafted was Gen.G and then Suning, as we know now, or JDG. That'd just be the end of the tournament instantly. You had no chance to get out. So, realistically, the easy group, the dream group, would have been Fnatic from Pool 2, Matchy from Pool 3, Unicorns of Love from Pool 4, and yeah, you know what? TSM would have their chances to get out of that group. I think before the tournament, I would have picked them to get out. After seeing how Matchy played, maybe I wouldn't actually think they would get out. But then again, I think also confidence would be different. And quite frankly, I will say, I haven't gone and checked if that's actually even possible with the Worlds format now. Because obviously with LPL having 4 slots and Europe having 4 slots, the shit format now has an extra conceit where it's like that also determines what groups are possible. Hence why the group door after planes was rubbish, because you basically knew what it was as soon as some of the teams qualified, because they could only be in certain groups because you have to avoid the teams from your region. So the point is, don't make the excuse about the group. This wasn't like in Season 6 where they had RNG and Samsung Galaxy. Like, for my money, 2 of the best teams in the whole tournament. Fnatic, yeah, like I said, they had weaknesses in the summer. Like, they were looking beatable, certainly in best of ones. Gen.G, they lost their head coach after the spring. Like, listen, they're still a solid team, but in my opinion, there was a gap, massive gap between them and Damwon. And I think there was even a slight gap for my money between them and DRX, despite the fact, yes, they played a close series that had some weird elements to it. LGD, listen, I'll be honest, in the play-ins, yeah, looked like hot shit. Looked like they weren't going to do anything. I don't know why people keep taking what happened the week before and applying it to next week. I mean, without logic, why do we just delete all of the summer? Like, that's a team that got to Worlds ahead of the likes of who? IG. Real teams that were doing shit. I mean, there's others as well, but if you don't have the LPL, you're not going to know some of the other teams that were viable. So here's the key thing to note when you talk about these groups. You can never complain about the groups realistically if you're TSM, because if you're the pool top seed and the group ends up being hard for you, you were just shit then. You joining the group if you're TSM makes the group easier. I mean, this was the definition of fucking free SM. These guys were free low for everyone they were playing, even LGD, who, as we've said, struggled. And by the way, didn't get out of the groups. The only Chinese team to not get out of the groups. Because 3 of them got out, it looks like, oh, they all did awesome. It's like, we're just disowning LGD, apparently. I mean, to be fair, lost Fnatic, right? So, if you look at it, if I'm Fnatic, I'm LGD, I'm fucking glad I got TSM. I'm fucking hell. If I'm Fnatic, that could have been Damwon Gaming. I don't want that team. If I'm Gen.G, that could have been Top Esports. Why the fuck would I want to play this? So I think pretty much everyone was happy to get this group with TSM in because it meant that, right, let's look at the other two. That's who we're competing against. No matter what you say about scrims and week one, who gives a fuck? So let's just be real. As the title of the video implies, TSM made history. Hey, good job, guys. But it's like when you break a record, but it's a shit record, like most interceptions in the NFL or something. This was, in all contexts, objectively looked at, I think most experts, if they considered all of Worlds that have happened, this was the worst Pool 1 performance in League of Legends history at the World Championship. They are only one of, I think I counted, 3 teams in history not to win a game despite being the number 1 seed when it was reasonable, or rather, or Pool 1 type team. I mean, listen, there was different formats in the past. So, for example, one of those 3 shouldn't even count because one of those 3 is Gamma Bears Season 3. And that's just because since TPA had won the one before, you just got to go straight into the round of 8. And theirs doesn't even count because if you know, most of those players were actually later Flash Wolves players, including, they didn't have Carson, but they had this guy called Wins, who was a pretty good jungler. And what happened to them? Well, they were seeded into the quarterfinals and they had to play SK Telecom, the one that like monstered a lot of teams at that tournament. And we don't actually even know how good that team is. Who were the other team? Good news, it was TSM at Season 2 Worlds, where, listen, sure, they had to play Korea's best team, and they got 2-0'd, and it wasn't like they were totally appalling. So, actually, I think their performance in terms of TSM was worse than these teams that won no games as well. So, this was the worst performance by the eye test and the context. Like, if I think of other number 1 like pool teams from the past, I look and I think, right, I've got to put forwards G2 from Season 6, because that was the group where Albus Nox got out of their group ahead of them, and they had CLG who, listen, yes, made the MSI final, yes, we're a champion, but they were busted up by the time they got to Worlds. But even so, it ain't as embarrassing as this. And there was a bunch of rookies on G2, like Perks, never been to a Worlds before that, and you know what, turned out to be a pretty good fucking player later. Congrats to all the NA fans who talk shit on him, by the way, massive egg on your face. Then I'll take Flash Wolves Season 7, because people forget Flash Wolves were in the group that TSM also didn't get out of, but they were the number 1 seed. Like, that's the world where, come on guys, you're doing something here, right? But then again though, that's not the same as like Pool 1 though, is it? Because at this point in time, we've already adjusted our expectations. So that shouldn't even be considered. This is Pool 1, TSM's from a major region. Then the last one is from the same tournament, Season 7 Worlds, which is EDG, where, I mean, no one really knows what happened to EDG at these Worlds. Like, I'm not saying like I know and they don't. Like, no one knows. Like, these guys would win the LPL and come in and just fucking be absolutely whack for some reason. That was the one where they didn't get out of the group that had Cloud9 in, who sort of just crept into Worlds, but then bizarrely got out of the groups ahead of them. And yes, they had SKT in their groups, so obviously, in theory, you weren't going to beat them, right? I think they also lost a game to like fucking AHQ when AHQ was well past their prime. I mean, LMS in general was on the decline at that point. So, realistically, teams overall are better around the world. Like, this is, like, what did you expect? I mean, I will say, because teams are better though, yeah, it's a bit harder when you play lesser teams, but there wasn't any of those in TSM's group. They weren't one of the teams that was having trouble in the play-ins, and then we can go, well, emerging regions, and you know, there's players over there, there's Koreans on some of the... No, they just had all the teams that you'd expect to see in a world championship. Then the game has opened up a little bit more. So yes, again, beatable, blah, blah, blah. But like, that doesn't apply to TSM. So in the context that we now know what happened to Team Liquid, the number 3 seed, which is, oh yeah, they just beat G2 and beat Sunning. Listen, those 2 teams one made the final, one of the other made semi-finals. Those were legit teams. That ain't fucking around. Like, what's TSM doing in comparison to them? G2 and Sunning, they're better teams than LGD and Fnatic. Then consider at the same tournament, well, remember there was another team from NA, it's called FlyQuest, right? With all those underrated players, Santorin, Power of Evil. I mean, I think Ignite's overrated, but whatever. Your boy Solo, you were all laughing at. What did they do? Oh, you know, just went and beat Top Esports, like the number 1 favourite, or at least top 2 favourite for the tournament itself. Now, admittedly, Top didn't play that great over the tournament. And also, if you look at when that happened in the tournament, it wasn't really that big a deal for Top Esports. They were getting out of the group anyway, and that was more about like probably just fucking around in the draft. But even so, you still beat them. Like, if anyone was fucking around against TSM, you wouldn't know, right? Because they're still styling on them. I think even in the draft, sometimes they did with some of the picks that they gave them at a point in time. Then, let's consider this. Because they got Gen.G as a Pool 3 team, I will say that is one minor detail I can point out that, listen, if you know the way the groups went, because Korea doesn't send the 4 seeds, that could potentially have been different. I'm not quite sure how, I haven't looked at the thing, but obviously, if you know what happened, because Vietnam couldn't send their representatives, Gen.G actually should have been in the play-ins, I believe. So maybe that could have changed everything. I mean, maybe they would have beaten someone unlimited, so who knows what happens there. But that's by the by. That's not anything to do with what did happen actually in the tournament. That's what if, right? So let's be real. Why did they go and do such a bad performance in this group? Well, you know what? Let's have a quick review of the year leading up to that. And you'll see that like TSM was never actually a good team throughout the whole year. So like anyone getting high off the fumes of that playoff run, like I'm not even sure you looked at that playoff run. And I don't mean that in says you didn't watch the games. I mean really think about how they did it and the nature of what happened. And when did they ever look dominant? When did they ever look actually good? When did they ever look like they could have gone outside their region and done anything? I mean, a lot of people said they could have lost to many of the teams in the playoffs, right? So in the spring split, when they had Kobe and they had Darduk, they were very messy, and they were already good in like a few games. They would win like half of them or so, but they weren't like good, were they, realistically? They would have good portions sometimes, but even though it was very messy even when they won. And that's despite, at the time, being considered a team with top 2 to 3 roster material, like position by position generally. I mean, remember, Darduk obviously is someone who's hailed as having a lot of talent, right? I personally think they misused and misunderstood Kobe, and that if you'd have known how that player worked, you should have kept him for the summer, but that's by the by as well. I also think the spring split, I mean, they apparently agree, exposed their coach, Peter Zhang, who should never have been their coach, because his track record is mad overrated for my money. I mean, I actually think on some level, his teams succeeded in spite of his failings, and then his failings were what limited them going further. Because he had these 2 teams that were like top-ranked teams at the end of the regular split. He had LMQ, the all-Chinese one, and he had Team Liquid, the one with Dominate, and Piglet, and Phoenix, and Quaz. These teams were looking like they could win LCS. When he got them into the playoffs, you could bank that the other team was going to win in the semi-finals. Like when they played the elite teams, they didn't have it. Now, that can't all go to him. And listen, as I often say, I won't put everything on a coach. Like, that's still not like you bombed out and didn't even make playoffs or whatever, but not, in my opinion, TSM material. Like, that just shows like they've got something really flawed with how they recruit or think about coaching for my money. Or certain players or owners don't want proper coaches and they think they know better about the game because they win the domestic championship, at least in the past and for this last split. Now, as I mentioned on other talk shows, basically, if they'd really wanted him, they probably could have had Youngbuck, in my opinion, one of the greatest coaches from any country. Listen, maybe in game knowledge he's not the greatest, but here's like people skills, which I think is exactly one of the problems that TSM has. The structure, how they communicate, the passive-aggressive nature of scrims. I told them they could have this. I told it to TSM Brass to their fucking faces. They didn't. They just ignored me, and they just went and got Peter Zhang instead, put him as their coach, right? They could also potentially have had Peter Dunn over at Mad Lions. They're not paying mega bucks. There's a reason he's left right now. Like, after his year in Splice, why wouldn't you want this guy? He's not someone you want to have at your team. Technically, yeah. Let me think, actually, what was that? Whatever. So, okay, so they fire Peter Zhang. By the way, nobody made them do that. Nobody made them fire their coach after one split. Like, Cloud9 doesn't fire their coach after one split. Does Team Liquid fire coaches after one split? What are you doing? Like, you did that. So then when you have problems in the summer split and problems in World, well, that's your own fault. Like, you said, this is the guy I want for my whole year. Oh, shit, it's gone bad. Fire him after one split. You can't do, this is what TSM and TSM players do all the time. They create a problem, they choose a problem, and then they turn around and go, well, look at this problem. I can't be held responsible for this, even though I am entirely responsible for creating this scenario. It's like if you shit your own bed, and then you go, oh, no, I'm going to have to sleep in a shitty bed. It's like, well, what are you going to blame except yourself, mate? Like, a fairy didn't come in and fucking do it, did they? So then they bring in, well, who do you know? They bring in Old Path, don't they? Oh, good old Path, always waiting to hop in. Except here's the problem. This guy has said repeatedly throughout his career, I wasn't even supposed to be here. Thinks he's auditioning for a fucking Clerks reboot or something. I never wanted to be a coach. I just had to do it, didn't I? And listen, he's won a bunch of championships doing it. But if you don't want to be a coach, stop fucking doing it. You've done it for 5 splits now by my count. How much more? Methinks the lady doth protest too much, especially when you're the GM. You're the guy who hires the coaches, theoretically. Stop hiring yourself, or hire someone competent, or listen to people telling you who you could hire. Then consider some of the people he hired as coaches. Song in Season 8, demoted straight after the first split, by the way. Zig's got a year. After a year, they decided, yeah, you know what, it's never us is the problem. You're the problem. And every other one, and all the junglers, and all the supports, and no one can shop the call except Bjergsen. But remember, we're never wrong. It was you. And apparently Path's never wrong, despite constantly ding, ding, just missing every fucking time. Every time. That's what happens when you pick coach's Path. Garbo. Then you've got that whole story, which I'll just weave in very quickly, that Doublelift and Bjergsen have said in interviews, usually when talking about the success of like, well, you know, like we wanted to kind of like have control. We wanted to tell the coach, like, listen, you just do the draft and stuff, but like, you know, we'll like coach the team ourselves, or like, you know, we want to have some control. We know how the team's going to work because we're veterans. But then they go, and those two players specifically go and it repeatedly underperform internationally, fail internationally, complain about it, and again act like, I'm just a player on the team. Well, no, you're not. That's not what you said a minute ago. Take responsibility, for fuck's sake. Be a leader. Otherwise, get the fuck off the steering wheel and let someone competent come in there. Someone who will actually tell you how to play, how to change your mindset, because you don't know. And if you can't admit that, Bjergsen and Doublelift, shame on you. And how the fuck are you going to teach any young players coming up under you if that's your mentality and you still push your problems away and push them onto other people and then kick the other players in the team and go, well, it's never me, even though I'm the only fucking follow-through thread of the entire scenario that always it happens to me. Give me a fucking break, will you? Then we'll go and consider, in the summer split, they were fourth in the regular portion, but okay, they won 12 games. Now, that does belie how troubled that split was. Like, they weren't top 4 until week 4. They were really dragging at the beginning of the split. Most of the league below them, by the way, were just super close in games. So actually being top 4 wasn't as crazy because everyone below them was like way below in that sense. Now, I will say, if you want to present an idea for later that Bjergsen was really good, hey, the metrics look good, right? He had the most player of the game awards. I mean, I will say the LCS commentators and all the people who vote for that shit are fucking ridiculous for giving it. Like, they're like when in the NFL, like if you're not the quarterback, you have to play like 4 times better than your position. Otherwise, the winner of the game who has the quarterback who did all right and didn't just throw 4 interceptions, he just always wins. Like that ridiculous one that Tom Brady won early on where it's like, this is a robbery. If I can't remember who it was, like that defensive player who's just a fucking monster, got like a bunch of picks and stuff. So anyway, we all know how that works, but let's pretend that was real and he really was the best player of this split overall, but better than everyone else. Okay, then you have big issues with your team, right? So why are all your fans talking shit? Why do you think you're good and why are you getting proud when all your series is and we won the split? So well, over what? You even admitted to yourself essentially you got one good player, right? Then consider all the media and the casters and the other players also agree, because when they did those 3 all-pro lists, this was mad. I don't think people noticed this looking back. They noticed it at the time because no one thought TSM was going to win LCS. They had one player, his name was Bjergsen, who made any of those 3 all-pro lists. Now that says something considering in the past. I also think teams like C9 and TSM automatically got players on those lists just from being top 3, top 2 material, whether the players deserved it or not. You could be a god tier player on a 5th place team. Good luck getting on one of those lists in the top teams. So then contrast, all 5 C9 players made those 3 lists collectively, 4 Team Liquid players made those lists, and 3 FlyQuest. That's saying something if 3 FlyQuests make it and only 1 TSM. Then add in, I'll just throw this in there, you know when Immortals just basically canned it and said, fuck it, just give the Academy squad some... Yeah, they beat TSM, by the way. Yeah, that happened. It was a best of 1, but they still did. So then you're going to go to Worlds and beat top teams at best of 1s. Listen, a lot of variance can happen in best of 1s, but it ain't good luck, is it? Let's quickly go through playoffs. We won't go too far, because some of this will tie into later on when we talk about Worlds. So getting the top seed and winning playoffs, even though, yes, in the short term, it's brilliant because it's another championship. You get to prove your rivals wrong, get people talking shit like me look like they're wrong. I mean, we are wrong in terms of prediction, obviously. But here's the problem. I actually think it's the worst thing that could happen to them. Their expectations would have been way lower otherwise. They never would have been cocky otherwise. Stupid fans wouldn't have invested again and then felt betrayed. They would have been reasonable and tempered with their expectations. You can get excited, but know like how likely it is that it happens and just get excited for the hope of it. They really thought we'd get out of this group, aren't we? And even people were trying to like analysts going, I think they could get out this one. I was like, there's not even a chance. Look at all the fucking jungle mids in that group. You're out your mind if you think they get out of the group. But okay, I guess I was just completely right on that one and everyone else was wrong. Oh well, that's a bad one, isn't it? So here's what I'll say. The reason why winning and getting the first seed was the worst thing that could happen to them is because they were the better team by the end of the playoffs in a few series. And even then, I think the Team Liquid one's debatable. But here's the problem. They weren't a good team at any point in that scenario. They were never a team in that point where I looked at like the top 2 seeds from any other region and thought, TSM could beat them in a best of 5. No, never. Never going to happen. Then I'll add, start at the beginning of the playoffs. So the Treats lineup got swept by Golden Guardians. Already warning bell, watch out, danger, Bjergsen. Okay, then they beat the dog shit Dig team, which should never be in that, and that's the flaw of that format, unfortunately. I love double limb, but not letting teams like that into it. Then they almost lost to GGS. Everyone's deleted that from their memory. They were down 2-0, and actually that was looking like a winnable game 3, but I think the GGS guys had nerves. Bjergsen fucking hard carried. Okay, cool. Biofrost was back. Somewhat decent, right? At least better than Treats, who was falling apart just before that. Now, I will say, the C9 win, I'm not even going to talk shit about. Respect for that. Beat them in 4 games. They were the dominant team earlier in the year. Yeah, they dropped off, but okay, that's what happened. It's not like anyone beat them for free. I do think they had issues, but again, we'll just say that's a legit win. The Team Liquid series, as I alluded to, that's where for me things get dodgy. Because I think actually over the whole series, Jensen outplayed Bjergsen. His team didn't win, but it was 3-2. They were so close to losing that series for my money. I think Tactical had a few issues, which is understandable. The guy is a rookie. He's even playing his former team. He's playing fucking Doublelift. No matter what you think of Doublelift's form, it's still Doublelift for fuck's sake. Like, that's just a scenario where it can happen. It's your first year. What, you're going to get proud of beating a rookie? Jesus. Doublelift also, by the way, in that series outplayed Tactical. Like, I thought he stepped up. I thought the stupid casters going on and on about how Bjergsen was the fucking player of the split and giving him these awards. Like, they ignored that the real storyline was Doublelift coming online again. Then they get to the final and play FlyQuest, which was close, but admittedly they led in a bunch of those games. Like, it was more like FlyQuest couldn't create the scenario to win, as opposed to like, they were so close to losing the final and then FlyQuest just threw. Like, not really. Like, FlyQuest played bad and had some issues, but again, FlyQuest was a solid team throughout the split. Maybe not the team you expected in the final, but you know what? Fair play for beating them. The problem is the way you beat these teams, the style of the wins. So you had Bjergsen carrying, exaggerated, but still the main carry, arguably the best player in the playoffs overall. You had Doublelift coming online in the supportive style. Spica was having these weird picks that threw teams off. The picks in general were part of the solution now, but this is where it killed you. Because they were a solution early that was going to kill you dead later if you thought it was still something in your back pocket. And they did if you saw how Worlds played out. So Bjergsen played in the big series against the big name teams, TF and Zilean just all the time, because seemingly, I mean, his TF is good, and stuff with globals, and especially Zilean, they have no clue how to play against that in NA. Like, you would think it was solo queue and people have never played the champion or something. Like, half those teams probably just fucking banned that in their next solo queue game. It was disgusting the way they played against his Zilean. And the idea that he wasn't just constantly smashed in lane in CS while playing that in matchups, it just makes me look down on the jungle mid combos in the rest of the region. So other than, like, I think one game on Syndra, which was one of the most meta champions and is a Bjergsen fucking signature champion, 9 out of his 15 wins in the playoffs were on TF or Zilean. So this was never going to work at Worlds. Like, TF can work, not the way they fucking play it. Zilean was never going to work, by the way. So the idea that, like, they were going to go to Worlds, listen, boy, Fnatic, so Europe, Korea, Gen.G, LG, these teams don't give a fuck about your Zilean. They don't give a fuck about your TF Zilean. You think they don't in their regions play killers on those champions? You think they don't play the other sides of the matchups and the counters? You're out of your mind. Like, Nemesis isn't a good mid laner right now. Bjergsen made him look half fucking decent though, didn't he? Then I'll just say this, and I'll be straight up. I think part of why TSM won the playoffs is because bringing Biofrost, they had all these veterans who've got the experience, who can be cooler under pressure, and the other teams, particularly Team Liquid and FlyQuest, at times did essentially into them. They didn't even sometimes know how to engage and create a fight, just fucking into them, or just gave them a dragon in some bizarre way. Like, let's put that by the by though. Let's go to Worlds now, shall we? And let's consider, remember the team went 0-6, so I'm not going to go game by game and break everything down, but I'm going to address how they played in some of the games. So I'm going to go best TSM player to worst TSM player. And you're going to love this fucking order when I get there, boys. So we're going to start. Who was the best player at TSM player at Worlds? Well, I know all you TSM fans who live in a permanent state of cognitive dissonance that this is still Season 7 and Bjergsen's still a really strong player. And even better, you seem to think he's not just a mage player who you've mocked all my favourite players have been, but that he's some monster who can play like all these like roaming carry champs and fucking pop off on assassins. It's like, boy, you are like 6 years in the past on that one. But okay, let's just consider this. Bjergsen wasn't the best player at Worlds, wasn't even close to. He was one of the main liabilities at Worlds. And even worse, since y'all always are like, well, Bjergsen's fine though, but kick the rest. It's like, listen to this video. You might learn a thing or two. The best player, I would say arguably, but I actually think he was the best player for TSM, was Spica, the rookie jungler, the guy who didn't even play as a jungler in the spring. Yeah, that's right. He had no expectations as far as I was concerned. So I was fine with him just bombing and being like some of the past TSM junglers. Like, I wouldn't even have complained about him. I might have said for some of the carries, well, you don't have a jungler, that's harder. No, that wasn't the case at all. Like, this guy who's barely played at the pro level in his career, look who he was facing and then consider his performance overall on average. He was facing self-made, arguably the best Western jungler, I think best Western jungler for the entire year. Peanut, a strong mechanical Korean jungler and a guy who plays well with his mid laner from the fucking LPL and can play all those matchups like Nidalee and all that shit. Clid, listen, he's had a down year, but still a pretty strong mechanical jungler from Korea. He made a lot of mistakes in this tournament, but it's not against fucking TSM. Oh, and by the way, just throw this in there. It's a carry jungle meta. These are players who play the carry junglers, as you saw in the group, right? So how are you expecting him to beat these guys? And you know what? He still performed admirably, and he sometimes had TSM in positions to win. But I'll tell you right up now, whatever you think about past TSM junglers, he was betrayed by this team, especially Bjergsen. But we'll get to that. In my opinion, Spica's the only reason this team went to Worlds without coming as the number 2 seed. If he hadn't have done that Shen shit or how he performed generally against Santorin, they wouldn't have beaten FlyQuest. Then you look at his champion pool. This is another thing I have to give this guy respect for in the context of Worlds. He rounded out by the time he got to Worlds to be able to play most of the better champions. Now, I will say, unfortunately, being a rookie, I expect him to be naive, to be a little bit delusional, to have confidence beyond maybe what he can do now. But how naive is the rest of TSM, all these veterans, that they thought he was going to be able to play and smurf on Nidalee against LPL and LCK teams? They play and they have the best junglers in the world on that shit. What are you talking about? Like, bro, grow the fuck up if you think that's going to happen. Like, that was like you didn't even give yourself a chance going in. Like, obviously, he did what he could, but why is he in that position? Like, in the future, maybe he's going to be one of the best NA junglers. He actually looks like he has some potential. He's shown it under pressure in 2 different scenarios now, domestically and internationally. But I will say this, for 2020, for Season 10, no matter what I think about TSM and the fact that I think they're a bit of a washed fucking org right now, he is not a TSM level player if you want to not only win the domestic championship, but be relevant internationally, especially not at the Worlds with all these strong jungle champions and a carry jungle meta. Like, he's just not going to have a chance then. So I think he was the best player for TSM. I'll give him actually a pretty good rating, not overall out of all the junglers in the world, but relative to my expectations, he smashed it. Then I'll go to, this might be controversial, I'm going to say Broken Blade after that, because what more do you want him to do? He has a rookie jungler. His mid jungler's never going to be like ahead, priority. I mean, fucking hell, mate. His ADC and mid were basically AFK or AWOL most of these games. And the whole year, that guy has been treated so poorly in terms of strategically how they played around him in the team and how his fans have reacted to him and basically called for him recut and said he's a waste of an import slot. Fuck that bullshit. This guy, just like Haunter, you won't appreciate what you had until he's gone. Now, if you get an even better top laner, sure, but I hope one day they'll look back and they'll realise what this guy was capable of doing. Except obviously you just blame him, so you don't have to blame fucking Bjergsen, don't you? Are you ready for the shocker? Oh no, there's 3 players left, right? Doublelift's in the middle. I know everyone bangs on Doublelift because TSM fans still in their hearts have that switch that they're really quick to flip of like, well, he's still technically CLG/TSL, TL Team Liquid Doublelift, isn't he? So they love to blame him to not have to blame Bjergsen, right? Let's just look at Doublelift in the playoffs. Sure, AD carries are known more to spam the same small pool of champions. They aren't like mid lane or top lane with massive pool. That I know everyone in NA is like, top lane with massive pool. Just watch LPL, you fucking idiot. So in his 15 wins in the playoffs, 12 of them came on Ashe and Senna. Now listen, in terms of Ashe, okay, that's fine. Should be able to play that if you're a top ADC now. The Senna one actually, I thought showed his development that he wasn't a wash by the end of the playoffs because actually he was fairly legit on Senna. He was able to play the support style and let Broken Blade be a carry player by the end of the playoffs. Now, the 2 Sennas that he played at Worlds, yeah, I never saw any of the shit that I saw in domestic play. I mean, fucking hell, I get that you can hit them across the other side of the map, mate, but where are all those clutch ults that you were pulling off in the playoffs? Then you look, okay, he played Ashe once, Ezreal once, Jhin once, and Aphelios, of course. But here's the problem. Those are all meta champions. And listen, there's not much more that you need to play if you're an AD carry at the moment, right? But just consider this for a second. Compare his Ashe to even Perks, who didn't necessarily have the best worlds, but, you know, and isn't even a fucking AD carry except off and on. Compare his Ezreal, or his Ashe as well, to Rulers. Night and day. Finally, let's take his Jhin. Just compare it to Huafeng. You know that guy for Sunning who's a complete fucking rookie and just has no experience compared to Doublelift? If I changed the nameplates and I didn't tell you what happened the last few worlds and I told you what these guys have done domestically, you'd assume it was Doublelift's Jin was Huafeng and the other way around. Nah, garbage. Here's the problem. I've said it many, many times before. I even told Doublelift himself in my interview with him. And you know what? He somewhat ceded some ground on that because if you talk sense to him, he can be quite lucid for a moment before he then goes onto his vlogs and just starts talking absolute fucking nonsense, just pulling shit out of his arse. Basically, I told him that when he plays top AD carries, mostly at Worlds, he just comes into it psychologically fucked. It's like he just respects him too much and just expects them to bash his fucking head in. And so as a result of this tournament, yeah, what do you expect? He's playing Reckless, who, by the way, now, I mean, with Doublelift's lack of development at Worlds, Reckless, I think, arguably, has gotten better and better every Worlds that goes on, right? I'll make fun of him for crying on stage, but his actual performance in the tournament, like last year, he was pretty solid in the group stage. Season 8, for my money, he was one of the people bashing in fucking EDG's heads. Actually, Caps was in it a bit in that series for me. So I think he's gotten better and better. So when Reckless is outperforming you and is considered a much better AD carry at the end of the tournament, you played basically the same length of time, similar in your careers, in both in the same regions, both the same. Give me a break, mate. Like, the context and the contrast is what makes Doublelift look bad, even though he wasn't the worst player on his team at this tournament. And I admit, I thought his support was absolute fucking shit and he had no help from mid, and a rookie jungler. So listen, we can all make excuses, but they did create this scenario for themselves. This guy, if he kept his shit together, could have been on Team Liquid. That could have been some amazing shit if he'd be still being in form. Also, I'll say this. He's one of those guys where, in my opinion, sometimes he thinks he's come to an epiphany, or he's had, I've observed something, I've realised something about the game. You know that saying that people sometimes have, that the advice you give to others is actually secretly, the reason you're giving it to them is because you know it's advice that you should apply, but you haven't really thought to apply it, or you can't apply it. Well, he once said years and years ago, some shit, I think it was when he was in CLG still, you should turn the nameplates off and just play against those champions. Brother, you're the only person in the fucking world who doesn't in any way play like that's the case. You play forget the nameplates being off. You play the nameplate's this big and says Uzi Eye Deft on your screen. You're like that fucking sweating pepper frog meme, oh God. It's like this guy goes in with a fucking butthole that could crush a thing of coal into a fucking diamond. Although ironically, he doesn't create diamonds under pressure, does he? Fucking hell. He just bursts his own pipes, doesn't he? I guess that's more reckless in the waterworks. So here's a question for you. What the fuck was Doublelift doing during that 5-man sleep? He was playing Aphelios. Bruh. If there was ever a time to show us the 200 years of that champion. It's while they all can't move and can't do anything to you. I think he even had his ult up. That's actually a fucking joke. Mate, that's got to be at least 1 kill. What other ADC in the main event that you put in that scenario gets 0 kills, does nothing? Now, I will say, considering as well, this is how I know nerves and psychological things are part of what fucks with Doublelift. Because one thing you can't complain about with Doublelift is the guy's mechanical ability, aptitude, is obviously one of the highest of any Western player ever. I've always thought he was comparable to the Asian AD carries in that regard. When he plays without pressure, he can be fucking sick, some of the stuff he can pull off. But you put him in this tournament, the reason I'm almost certain nerves get to him and his brain just betrays him is because, mate, he was QSSing like he was Captain Jack on fucking Quaaludes. How late is he going to press that fucking button? It's one thing to just not do it at all. To just go, oh, fuck, I should have done that. Give me a break, mate. You're supposed to have insane hand-eye coordination and reflexes. So you know what? I saw he did his little video. Maybe I'll do something addressing that later, but I'll just say for now, miss me with that bullshit about scrims and practice, mate. You've been there for years and years. You could have had a say in who they get as coaches. I mean, you could just ask the fucking president, couldn't you? Half of it's your fault. It's time to start taking responsibility. But with that said, there was 2 worst players on your team, so let's get to them. Now, listen, I'm not going to totally hate on Bjergsen and put him as the worst player, but the fact he's second to last, and I think it's unreasonable to put him any higher, is fucking absurd when you consider he plays the most important position in the game, traditionally, mid lane, and it's always been his team. And you have these people saying he's doing it's almost like a player coach, isn't he? And I've heard stories that he just goes around the coach sometimes, goes to Reggie or fucking Path, etc. So miss me also with the idea he's just the best guy ever. He is a really cool guy. He does have a great work ethic, but the problem is he's got fucking Stockholm syndrome from being a TSM his whole bloody career since after the first year, and he just doesn't know. He's like a kid who grew up in foster home, just doesn't know what a loving family's like, doesn't know what it's actually like to be in a good scenario. But if they then go and commit like violent crime and make all bad decisions, they still have to pay the consequences for their decisions. You can't just go, well, can't be blamed, can you? That's not fair. So here's the problem. Let's get into this, shall we? And if you're a Bjergsen fan, get out the fucking tissues or maybe turn off right now because you're not going to be able to handle this. Let's just start with his pocket pick, right, that you were all laughing at when he was smurfing on people in NA with. It's the Zilean pick, isn't it? The idea they would even try that is insulting. It tells me he has no champion pool. They haven't watched the other regions. Or in scrims, they were so trash by the end, they had no options left. And he thought that was comfort. He thought, well, I'm going to be down in... Well, maybe he didn't think he was going to be down in CS, in which case he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about in the global meta, which I'm not even a fan of, but listen, it weren't working for you, mate. Now listen, why are you going to try a Zilean pick against fucking BDD? He is a Zilean player. He plays that shit in LCK, my boy. Not against bums that don't know what to do against it in NA and just ARAM mid all day long. Gen.G, for that pick against Gen.G, it was also, by the way, utterly brain dead for the comp that TSM had. So either Bjergsen's just a pawn in the coach who secretly he is and influences and can go around it, and he even owns part of it. Let's not get into that, shall we? Or we'll go fucking mad with the mental gymnastics and snap all our spines in half and make a TSM logo or some fucked shit. Then consider this. He went back to that well against LGD. How dare you? How dare you, after the way you performed in that first game, go back to that pick? If you do, mate, it better be a redemption game where you do awesome. Spoiler, it wasn't. Then let's talk about LeBlanc. Remember that thing I said earlier about how people want to believe he's this assassin player, he's dangerous, and you know what? In NA, he's kind of like our Caps. Like, shut the fuck up. His LeBlanc's was a yikes, dog. That's a yikes from me. Did he ever land the fucking chains? I know there was one time where it was like almost a guaranteed kill when he did like a little flank on him and he just fucked it completely. By the way, so much for Xinged being overrated here. Not with your boy Bjergsen going to tournament season, and he didn't even get out of groups, did Xinged? Then let's consider when he played one of the most meta champions, a champion that's supposed to be OP if mid laners get it, by the way. And by the way, the fact that anyone would even leave it open against Bjergsen says it all about how those scrims probably went and how they actually think about him, not what they say in interviews to get Western fans. That is supposed to be an OP champion. When Nemesis played it, he was beating G2. He was beating fucking Rogue. He was showing them work. And Nemesis, by the way, was a bottom 2 or 3 mid in all of fucking LEC. And I think overall is a worse mid generally than Bjergsen, but not at Worlds. He looked better than Bjergsen. So then consider this. What did he do with the Lucian? If you go look at the scoreboard, it's going to cost him, he was like 7, 2 and 5. At one point I think it was like 6, 0, 0. Mate, those are fucking empty calories. Those were like fake stats in the sense that they didn't like impact the game at all. It reminds me like back in the day, there was a classic Reckless game in Season 4 where he goes like 7-1-1 or something on Vayne, and it's just him like refusing to engage in fights and die, and so his team just doesn't have the damage, just fucking loses the game. But he gets to look cool moonwalking out there with his fucking gamepedia like, not my problem, boys. This was the most bullshit game ever to have those kind of stats. Because part of the reason he had those stats is that he wasn't willing to fucking risk it for a biscuit, was he? Like that bullshit he pulled at the Baron, where Spica basically had them in position to get that Baron, and then they just betrayed him. And Bjergsen, by the way, didn't use, I think he had the ult, he didn't use the ult on the Baron, it didn't help at all. Mate, at Worlds, Bjergsen is not clutch. He's not some really good performer. It's not like in this LCL player, he's 1v9 and he's carrying and he's clutching. If they lose, he's still a really good player. He's garbo at this tournament, mate. This tournament and generally at Worlds, but we'll get into that. So then let's look at the guy's champion pool, right? He has a champion ocean. That's why he just pocket pick. All he has is the pocket picks. Let's be real. Like, listen, is TF? Yeah, his TF's all right. Was he playing at this tournament? Then let's consider the Lucian that I've said. Most played champion at Worlds to this point, by the way. Well, I've told you what happened with that one. Then he played Syndra, his fucking signature champion from the beginning of his career. One of the most played champions at Worlds. Yeah, didn't do much with that. Remember, he's supposed to be able to do something in lane with that to help his fucking jungler who's playing all these carry junglers. Is he fuck? Then he played Galio. By the way, he was absolute garbage in that game. It was actually shameful. Again, so many other mids in the tournament played Galio. Make this guy look like he's fucking bronze or something. Is Orianna? Well, you never saw it, did you? Even though it was the most meta champion. Everyone else is playing it. Nah, didn't play that. Silas? You saw caps popping off? Nah, didn't play that, of course. Azir? Yeah, people are still playing Azir. Well, he was garbage in LCS on that, so obviously he didn't want to play that, so he didn't play that either. Let's consider what else he could have had in the meta. If he was this assassin player that you all think he is from Season 4, Akali? Nah, didn't see that, of course. In LCS in past years, he's been good on Zoe. Never got an appearance. What about Echo? It's a good counter for certain match. Nah, doesn't play that, of course. LeBlanc isn't even particularly meta for this Worlds. In fact, do you want to know something mad? He's the only person who played it, did nothing on it, and lost on it. Sound. This is supposed to be your star player. This is the guy you're saying is the only good player on the team. The only one you don't blame for Worlds. So let me ask you this question, hypothetical of course, or rather rhetorical. Who is making these picks? Remember, I thought Doublelift and Bjergsen get to have say, and they're veterans, so they can say it. Remember, if you ever flame the coach, people go, well, what do you know, the player didn't ask for that. All they do is just dance around with mental gymnastics, these TSM fans. Hasn't Path known them for fucking years? So even if he picked it, why is he picking that champion? Why is he picking these matchups for him? This guy was making other mids look godlike on Orianna. And the joke of Orianna is it's the most basic bitch, just safe mid laner, isn't it? It isn't one that you go fucking ham on unless you're like Season 3 Faker or fucking Season 7 Rookie or maybe Knight at times. Even Knight wasn't that good against fucking Sunning on it, but you get my point. Think of Caps on Silas or TF if he gets those champions. Let's just be absolutely all cards on the table right now. If y'all want to hate on Jensen or my boy Froggen from back in the day, hasn't had a good year this year, but obviously in past years it was comparable. You always go with the angle of, yeah, but Bjergsen can play all the champions with Rome and all this. Nah. This Bjergsen's a mage player, my dude. He became everything you despised and everything you mocked years and years ago. And when you're like, you can't evolve with the times. Like, your boy can't evolve with the times. Can't get a good coach, can't get a good jungle, can't get a good shot calling, can't get the spot like I said. Give me a fucking break. Where was the pop-off? All I'm asking, just give me one pop-off. Give me one pop-off game where it shows you're still good no matter what. If he was this 1v9 player, this great, the Faker of the West, Faker of NA admittedly, then why didn't we see it against Fnatic and LGD? Flawed teams. I tell you why. Because he was playing like a massive pussy at this event. And no, the fact that he chose to retire and become a coach isn't going to mean I'm going to go, I better go easy on him because he might feel bad. I feel bad watching these games and knowing that, listen, Cloud9 was shit, but like, fuck it, put them there, give them a boot camp. Maybe they could have done something. Like, Niski at least wouldn't have played like a massive pussy. And I don't even rate that guy particularly. I think he's just an above average player generally. So let's consider some of the things he did. First of all, he was doing his best double lift from season fucking 6 or whatever it is cosplay by just saving his flash all the time. Oh, no, not all the time. Just aggressive flashes in. Like, he didn't do a flashing on that fucking sleep, did he? When all of Gen.G couldn't move and he's almost guaranteed to get like 1 or 2 kills. Maybe he could have even gotten more if they actually help him. Nah, just running away, just refusing to help. Then how about he will flash, but only defensively away from the fight, so as not to get, I'm getting out of here. Leave that Spica guy to die. I've got to get the fuck out of here. Like, are you kidding me? You're the leader. You're supposed to be the carry. You're playing your picks. You're blind picking some of this shit. I mean, are you playing the game blind as well? Are you fucking Lee Sin cosplay as well? Then let's consider this. I want to take this and I'm going to stack it with the other worlds. So I know everyone loves to blame Doublelift for all his world's failures. By the way, Bjergsen's one world's success, top 8, was when that ridiculous thing happened to SK Gaming, the other team that would have challenged them for a top 2 spot, and they still came second anyway. Like, well, how more boosted do you want to get? That's the freest fucking shit of all time. And they had no Korean team in their group. So when I look at Bjergsen's worlds all in all, and I look from Season 5, Season 6, Season 7, Season 10, because those are the ones he played at, and he's going out in these group stages, how overrated this guy is, specifically at Worlds. Domestically, we're splitting hairs. I think he's slightly overrated, or certain splits he's overrated and he gets a break or he picks it up in the playoffs. But I do think he was one of the greatest players to ever play in LCS, and generally was even a pretty good Western player. I mean, go watch my greatest top 16 of all time from the West. I have him in there. I give him a decent ranking. I don't fuck with the guy. He's won championships. He's been a good player. But at Worlds, just never shows up. Best case scenario, he just doesn't look like the worst player and sort of chills, or has at least in Season 6 he had the odd game that looked pretty strong, right? Now you look at him, let's just be real for a second. If someone went and for the last 3 years was donking on the LMS when it was there, or the PCS now, and then they came to Worlds, everyone was hyping them, faker of their region, and then they performed the way Bjergsen does, I changed the nameplates, you would mega flame that, and anyone who said he was good, and go, that's what happens when you overhype players who aren't that good and just shit on bad regions. What the fuck is your guy doing then? I mean, God knows how many TSM fans would never shut the fuck up about Jensen if he played the way Bjergsen does. Each Worlds, or on average. Spoiler, he's way better than Bjergsen at Worlds. That's why his resume is way better. So give it up to the guy, for fuck's sake. You don't have to say overall he's better than Bjergsen. I think that's a 1A, 1B type scenario that you can have an interesting debate about. But the idea that he's just garbo or he's like way worse, like, are you watching the most important tournaments in the world every year, boys? It ain't LCS. Let's make another statement that's pretty crazy. Not only is he his kryptonite, but Power of Evil was better at this Worlds, in general has been better at Worlds than Bjergsen. I mean, he's even been responsible for eliminating the fucker from Worlds and other tournaments, right? I think, no joke, and this is not in any way hyperbole, I think Bjergsen was one of the worst mids in the entire main event of 16 teams. And that says a lot, because you had PCS teams in there. You had, like, rookies coming from fucking Europe, and this guy was one of the worst in the whole group. And the fact that every year, this fake Riot hype gives him, like, top 20 player at Worlds status. Get the fuck out of here. How many times can a guy be a false bill of goods, never show up, and you still give him that status? And now people in history are going to look back, wow, must have had a bad performance. He never has a good performance. Like I said, he had odd games in best of ones in past years. Give this guy, yeah, I'll say it, fuck it. Give this guy, along with all those MVPs, all those titles, tell you what, you know that Dade award we give to like those Asians who underperform because everyone says they're the best player in the world? In the context of NA in the West, give Bjergsen at least 2 or 3 of those awards to go in his little fucking trophy cabinet of the Dade of the West or Dade of LCS. He comes in hyped to fuck every time. We're told he's a 1v9 player. He never 1v9s practically, and it's somehow never his fault because people are that fucked in the head that they're in love with him as a person or a narrative storyline. They won't just look at his actual play and be frank and consider thought exercise. What would I do if this was a different player? What would I do if it was a player I disliked? But you know what? Good news for Bjergsen. Aside from future videos, can't fucking going off this off-season, boys. There's one player left that I can sort of... Oh, that's a chaser. I can use Biofrost to get that disgusting taste out of my mouth. So, Biofrost, let's just be real. First of all, he shouldn't have been there. He was already subbed out, but they brought him back. He wasn't good. I mean, I'm thinking of like the moment when he flayed away the fucking bounty. Why would you even do that? Like, what sort of communication and brain-dead fucking thinking was this? This guy looked so shook the whole World's long. And again, he's another veteran. And every time he was on TSM in the past, you all overrated him as fuck because of his Rakan and because he had some of the best laners in the whole world. Not in the whole world, in the whole Western region. Meanwhile, he goes to CLG. It's like, well, they're bad, but he's sort of good. It's like, mate, he's been an average to slightly above average player, mainly pick dependent and having good players with him. That's it. He's not some monster player. Got to stop overrating these fucking guys. Now, how about that moment where this killed me? You know that game against Fnatic where Broken Blade gets his absolute shit pushed in the bot lane, and rather than just like blast Corn over the wall and go help him, your boy, who I think it was when he's playing Leona, Biofrost inexplicably is just warding a brush while they're simultaneously fighting the dragon or trying to help Broken Blade. Just does neither, just wards a brush. Oh, that's cool. At least you can see vision in that brush that no one's going in then. Meanwhile, Broken Blade gets his head smashed in, and then, cause this idiot's just sat over that wall, not doing anything, Selfmade steals the fucking dragon. I can't imagine how depressing this tournament must be for your Spica. I know because it's his first one, he probably just fucking enjoyed the experience of that. Well, there'll be chances in the future, as sadly young players always think. Man alive, they betrayed this guy. They just gave him nothing. I'm just so glad people generally didn't flame him because I thought under the circumstances he performed admirably, unlike people like Biofrost. Remember, Biofrost, there's a reason they replaced him with a rookie this year. Because you know what? The only reason they brought him back was that rookie failing. Treats falling apart by the playoffs. And at the time, in summer, ironically not having a good champion pool for the meta and certain picks you had to play, which is silly because actually at this Worlds, I think his champion pool would probably have fit way better. It's not because Biofrost was good. And they're going to say in scrims he was better, but again, better compared to what? Treats just fall apart, mentally destroyed, plays with fucking Doublelift, who always does this to his fucking supports unless they're actually sick. Then let's consider this. He also had his own little mini Bjergsen type meltdown champion pool wise, because he had one pick as well. He had Rakan, right? And in the playoffs, that Rakan was so important, it won him half his games that he played. Now, that meant against Golden Guardians, when he actually came in, Game 4, they were facing elimination. Rakan pick comes out, they win it. Every game against Cloud9, he's playing Rakan. Listen, that bot lane was getting a lot of hype this spring. Okay, fair play. You're doing work on it, my dude. Against Team Liquid, faced an elimination potentially again. Out comes the Rattan. Game win. Final game, game 5 of the finals against FlyQuest. Facing elimination, you lose the championship. Rakan pick, wins it again. This is his pocket pick. It's his signature champion. He's always been clutch on this, particularly because he just has he has a good mind for when to use the ult, if you notice. This is the problem though. You can't get by on one pick alone. Like, in my opinion, his playoff run was like a mini Bengi towards the last few years in SKT, where you only come in for the clutch factor and to play certain champions. It's more like the other guy fails and they just chuck you in and then you just try to use some of your experience, even though your skills are pretty busted and washed at this point. Then let's consider, aside from his Rakan, well, I mean, actually, including his Rakan, he just played a different champion in every game. Wasn't good on any of them, was he? Like I said, his Leona was fucking trash. I mean, I will say, the one pick, if you could somehow get a genie out of a fucking magic lamp and make a wish, the wish you would make for Biofrost is, please at least let his Bard work, because that was on the only other champions he had this year. And yeah, surprise, his Bard is fucking garbage compared to the likes of the Mickey X's and some of the fucking Korean players who play that shit. Now let's look at them as a team. So I'm going to incorporate some of the things I said before, but I'm going to be more bold. The biggest problem TSM had wasn't all the above. They still came in with all that, but had at least chances to win some of these games. Their biggest problem is they were too pussy. They played like cowards. They played like they didn't believe in each other, that they had no conviction in themselves, in the coaching staff, in the draft, in the champions that they're playing, even their comfort champions. They got all their champions, by the way, pretty much most of the time they wanted. The other teams just gave them. Think about when they did that 9-man sleep against Gen.G. If you're not going to go in on that, when are you going to go in? Where's the go button? Where's this shot calling? Where's Bjergsen knowing the map? Shut up saying Bjergsen and Doublelift are shot callers. They're not. They're people who overwhelm people mechanically in lane and win team fights where it's just an ARAM region and they're mechanically strong players who are super vets compared to the people they're playing. Stop saying they're fucking shot callers. One of the reasons I say where's the go button is, I don't know where the go button ever was for this TSM lineup particularly. Like, even in playoffs, I actually thought the other teams at times just inted into them and started bad fights or continued skirmishes that they were winning but then allowed them to be turned. Like, it wasn't that TSM was making all the clutch moves. Now contrast TSM with Team Liquid. So TSM week 2, appalling. Team Liquid week 2, everyone's laughing at Team Liquid when TSM beat them. Their week 2 looks straight fire. Let me ask you this question. Which team made you more proud to be from NA? Proud to be an American, 'cause I know TSM is free. And I'll blame everybody but Bjerg, so listen up, Reggie. I don't even know how the rest of the fucking song goes. Then let's consider that tower dive they did. I think that was against Gen.G in the first time. No, LGD. I think it was against LGD. Where they basically just like get a kill and then they're just like, well, kill all there was. No need to get greedy and actually try and win the game. But these guys don't have any fucking heart. That's the worst thing about it. Including the veterans. Like, think about, contrast them against teams with way less resources and chances. The PCS teams, in the past you had GAM, you used to have those fucking LMS teams like Flash Wolves or AHQ who could score games against some of the best teams in the world and really give the LPL or LCK teams a run for their money. They at least go for the throat. They'll try crazy drafts and just force things early in the game. TSM was fucking garbage, and by the way, this was a tournament where you could do creative level ones to potentially counteract draft disadvantage or lane disadvantage or just get early kills that you could potentially snowball off. All I'm going to say is, if we're talking about level ones, that first Fnatic game, if that's the one I'm remembering correctly, I know it was one of the Fnatic games, was absolute trash what they attempted. And it actually backfired in their face so badly, you'd think it was like fucking Lena discussing a potential trade of a player during someone streaming and then going, well, better fire up the Reddit account. The worst thing about this was they came into this Worlds with essentially no tools and no strengths to get out of their group or to have any impact on the tournament. And that is a fucking disgrace because they were nowhere close to the meta in terms of aptitude when they actually got to Worlds. And you know what the irony is? I mentioned it earlier. I actually think if somehow they could have had the vision, they could have seen into a portal in the future, what you'd do is you'd play the year the same way. But if they could have brought Treats and Kobe to this particular Worlds, I think they would have had decent champions for the meta, they would have had the right style, it would have forced people to play through the solo lanes, and maybe they could have done something at that point in time. I actually think, and I'll just mention this as a last point, I think unironically that it's time that NA got a spot taken away from it, not the top one, obviously, and it should go to LCK. LCK, LEC, and LPL should have 4 slots. I think it would be better for the tournament. Remember, LCK's gotten out of groups the last 2 years running. LPL's the dominant region. LEC at least has teams that challenge these top teams. LCS is doing naught in comparison. So just make it down to 2 slots and just have people fight over those 2 slots. I even think, unironically, that it might even help the NA teams if they had to go through play-ins. I would even say the same, by the way, for the lower EU seeds. I think that would give them a little bit more variety in who they play. They'd get the warm-up games. It's like throwing someone into the UFC when they've already fought in a small org. Sometimes they just get smashed if you give them a top title fight immediately. They would probably have a better chance if they warmed up gradually and got more practice time. So, listen, I hinted at it earlier, but if you're a TSM fan, you're going to be watching this off-season on my channel. Oh, no, is he still talking? Because I'm going off this off-season. I'm putting the off in off-season, and I'm putting the season in off-season by roasting you motherfuckers and making it delicious flavour. I'm going in on TSM. The holy war isn't over, boys. So you know what? If you like this video, maybe you hit the like button. If you want to see more, maybe you subscribe. Maybe you make a comment for the algorithm. Maybe you can just cry about TSM in there. I know you can't help yourself, so go ahead. Make me more money. Make me more hits and fame, you fucking clowns. I'm not going anywhere. In fact, you know what? If you want to see me all the time and hate click this shit, press the notification bell. Ding! Like TSM getting knocked out of Worlds. Lovely sound at the end of a round, isn't it? Oh, and by the way, I've also got a Clips channel where there's going to be bite-sized ass remings for clowns like TSM and the dumbest president in all of the North American region. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Pronogo, Alexander Rao, Andreas Kroknes, ErikHillestad, Hades, JDubs, the Puyallup Tribe, Tobias Bernasconi, VatriSam, Xinged, James Pederson, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Do you want to ask a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers? See who the upcoming guests are going to be? Maybe you'd like to take part in one of those monthly donated discussions with me about esports. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scruminati today in the Patreon link in the description box below.